almost done with the season. We got another penultimate to a penultimate. Season 6, episode 8, No One. And I have made my thoughts on this episode very, very clear in multiple different instances in the past. Pat, I don't know. Did you have any like vocalization of certain thoughts about this particular episode before we get into it?
Listen, I'm just going to say that the Talkin TV family that's Talking Thrones with us here on this podcast probably wouldn't mind this being on the nose and being called Arya Stark, right? Because
right. I mean,
as we know, at the end of the episode, she declares her name, and it definitely ain't no one.
That's for damn sure. All of that and more on tonight's episode of Talking Thrones. All right, this one's a little bit of a doozy because we're 1 week out from Battle of the Bastards, famously one of the biggest and arguably, in a lot of people's opinions, best episodes of the entire show. It kind of was the perfect finishing point for this season as far as really being the declaration of, okay, this is where Game of Thrones has achieved itself. This is where Game of Thrones has come over the last 6 years. This is where the show has finally peaked. And I know we talked a little bit about the ending of last episode where it's like just how ridiculous that moment was. But I guess the thing that kind of saved it is that it was coming off such a good episode. Like, The Broken Man is, honestly, looking back, probably one of the best episodes of the entire show. And it's kind of underrated because of just the show's, how it kind of dipped critically wise in the second half. But then you have this entire extended sequence at the end of this episode dedicated just to Arya. And I think kind of in hindsight, because like I said at the beginning of this episode, I've made my thoughts very vocal in the past. I'm going to try and keep it as PG as possible. I'm not a fan of this episode at all. This is one of my least favorite episodes of the entire show, if not my least favorite episode of the entire show, at least until we get to those last couple episodes of season 8. Save that for when we get there. But it just, for me, it's like it's one of those things where not every plot line in this episode is bad. In fact, quite a lot of it is actually pretty good, but it's filler. It's really, again, it's kind of wrapping up some of the loose overhanging threads before we get to Battle of the Bastards and Winds of Winter. And again, just the Arya sequence at the end and how they wrap up. It's the ultimate example of Benioff and Weiss just giving up. Like, completely giving up. They're like, look, this is basically us saying we don't really care about every plot line in the show now going forward. I mean, it had become pretty apparent in the last couple of seasons that was the case, but this is like the episode where they really officially made that clear.
You know what, Dom? Only thing I want to talk about, the only thing I'm thinking about right now is just how the Hound does a Jason Voorhees on these members.
I mean, let's start it.
The Band of Brothers.
Again, it's like, right. so like they took the Arya sequence, they extended that out, but they also continue with the Hound. Brilliant again.
Oh yeah, it's like
a good storyline from last
right.
episode.
The Jason thing.
Oh, it's great.
The breathing into the microphone in the
great.
woods.
Yeah,
he just has that axe. And he's just
it's not shot like a horror movie, but it feels so much so. Like the scene is played for laughs too. The way that it
100%.
Mad quest for revenge. It still is one of the funniest sequences probably of the entire show. Back before the humor started to become forced, where he cuts these guys a new one after they're telling some crass story about God only knows what. And he comes in, wipes these guys off the board, and the one guy is like, you have anything to say before you die? And he's just screaming these profanities, and it's like, really, that's the best it could say. It's hilarious. It's just, once again,
no, it's great, and it plays to the Hound. Like, he's angry, he's mad as hell, and he's not going to take it anymore. And here he is, kind of marching in slasher style with an axe, and he takes out these guys that literally slaughtered. The religious people are like. I don't know.
I don't even know what to call. I don't know. I've called them a bunch of different things. I've called them the convent. I've called them the commune. Like I don't know, like the offshoot seven. Faith.
Yeah, I guess a commune is the
commune's
best
probably the best way to describe it. I feel like.
Yeah, because they're just working together for the common good, and the religion aspect was, as Ian McShane there said, it's like, I don't know if there's a real God or whatever. They were just doing it. To be good people at this point, or try to turn over a new leaf. And so, whatever, a commune sounds good to me, but the Hound clearly angry, and he's going to get his revenge. And man, he just chooses a brutal way to do it. Like the shot where he like underhands the axe and basically disembowels the one guy.
Great. Oh, it was so good.
Yeah, it's just disgusting shot, but
it's so disgustingly appealing is what it is.
Yeah, well, it's just that level of violence in the show that is typically, sometimes it's reserved, sometimes it just hits us over the head, sometimes it's just right. And I think here in this episode, there's definitely a lot of violence, specifically when it comes to the Hound and his brother, the Mountain.
Absolutely, yeah. And the other obviously big thing that's kind of established here is, like I said, another returning character. I gotta keep track, but I think we've gotten like a returning character like maybe once an episode, like every single episode this season, where again, out of the blue, he just stumbles upon the guys and he finds it. Someone has beat him to it. Someone has beat him to revenge. It's the Brotherhood. Beric and Thoros, they're back, and after we kind of abruptly left them in season 3.
These were all deserters of the Brotherhood, right?
I'm not quite sure. They never really said it. It's like if they were deserters or not, or if they were just members that just kind of went off the beaten path and, strayed from the righteous cause, So, because obviously it's become very clear that the Brotherhood has kind of lost its way after the war ended and after the Lannisters won against the Starks, because the Brotherhood, they kind of even said it, they weren't really for any one side. They were kind of just trying to stick up for the common man, the little person, as a result of like all those farms in the Riverlands and the Westerlands that were just being torched by armies on both sides. So yeah, they probably haven't had much to do, since, and they've probably been like just trying to like catch up with a few of their members that have obviously, kind of lost that motivation, and this was clearly an example of it. And it's once again a great fascination. The Hound has always had great chemistry with Beric and Thoros, as far as that goes. They were originally going to kill him. He killed Beric and watched him come back from the dead, and now he's just chilling. He's just making fun of. This is the beginning of what I call like the Hound and Beric's buddy cop journey that lasts all the way up until season 8, when Beric unfortunately dies, for the last time, when he keeps joking around about how Beric's just going to randomly come back from the life. I think it's funny because obviously Jon coming back to life at the beginning of the season was such a big deal that you almost forget, oh yeah, no, there are other people who have done this. Beric came back 6 times or something like that, and I think there's this really interesting back and forth between the two of them where it's like the Beric is like, look, okay, we want these guys dead just as much as you do, but we have to do it the right way. He's like,
at first it's like the Hound wants to kill all 3 and they're like, no, these are our guys. This is our thing. And he bargains with them. He's like, we'll give you 1. And then he's like, no, I want 2. And so they're basically naming that execution. Like, how many people do you want to execute? And the Hound gets to actually kill 2 of them. But then he goes to swing his axe, and these guys are like, nah, man, that's too brutal, Yeah. And I guess they're right, but at the same time, the Hound's right. It's like,
yeah, it's like we're hanging them for burning down a commune. It's like, yeah, they were my friends,
Yeah, but I don't know. The Hound making the point that it's just not as harsh of a death than, chopping off a bit here and there with an axe and making them suffer. And obviously, I think it's bad enough you're kicking out the sort of stool from under them, and they're it's not like they snap their necks. They kind of let them.
Yeah, they just kind of let them dangle. I mean, they still suffer is the thing. It's not like it's like a quick snap, boom. They're like, oh no. And also, I do find it like quite interesting. It's like, don't you think it's a little bit poetic? They killed Brother Ray by hanging him. It's like, don't you think they deserve the same thing? But I don't know. That's getting into more specific semantics. The biggest thing that's established here, obviously, again, there's a reason why they reintroduced the Brotherhood. It's the fact that it's clearly setting up for the Battle of the White Walkers. The thing that was so interesting about the scene is the fact of showing for the longest time it's really just been Jon that's kind of had to deal with the White Walkers, and you really haven't had any of these other sides that are really aware of them or really kind of involved. And this is kind of the beginning of showing how the White Walkers are, and them coming are slowly beginning to affect everyone, where Beric, obviously, he's a follower of the Red Priestess. Obviously, through Melisandre, you begin to understand that the Red Priests are, kind of an ancient enemy of the White Walkers, even, kind of going into the, not quite the same sense as the Children of the Forest, but, it obviously goes into the whole prophecy of ice and fire. They worship the Red God, the Fire God, R'hllor. The White Walkers are the embodiment of ice. I feel like that's pretty obvious obvious enough as it is. But the biggest thing is that how Barrett gets to the Hound is he plays to the Hound's kind of change in consciousness, where the Hound throughout the last couple seasons, the whole thing is that he has slowly realized that he doesn't want to be just this blunt killing machine, that he does care about the innocents. He does care about defending the little guy, kind of the same thing that they do. It's one of the reasons why he developed such an emotional connection to the commune, and why he was so ripped apart by their death. And Barrack plays that is like, yeah, this threat that we're facing, it's going to consume and destroy everything, and you could play a part in helping to stop that. So it's like you could go off and be another wanderer, or for once in your life you could actually be on the right side and actually actually do the right thing for once. And
yeah, well, I think it plays into last episode where he was told that he can sort of recuperate and get back, and like Ian McShane couldn't do it, right? He basically led his people to be hanged, but the Hound can go out there and still make a positive impact in the world, and really, I guess, make good in the eyes of the gods.
Right. I mean, hey, he becomes part of, like I said, like I begin to call it, the Fellowship of the Snow that goes north and grabs the White Walker next season. So hey, he's good for something at the very least. I don't know how actually useful he was in the Battle of Winterfell, but like I said, that was just an excuse to get all the named characters in one place at one time. But let's get to it. River Run. It's another, like I said, it's another thing that gets wrapped up relatively quickly. It's another big reunion. There's a lot of reunions this episode. I'm just realizing that now. Brienne, she arrives at River Run after having been sent there by Sansa. It took her a couple episodes in order to get there. The siege is still underway. She meets with Jaime. It's the first time they've seen each other since beginning of season 4, when he originally sent her on the mission to go and find Sansa. And it's a rather interesting scene where it's like they're still not quite friends. Obviously, they're still friendly with each other, but it's once again demonstrating that level of mutual respect that, again, just randomly, weirdly transitioned into a romantic encounter between them. Again, we're getting too close to the final
I think they do respect each other. I do think they have feelings for each other, but obviously they have different paths in terms of where their honor is going to take them. And at this point, those paths are not necessarily butting heads against each other. Although Brienne does, after Jaime says, that is your sword, it will always be your sword, right? Because she tries to return it. Mm-hmm. Basically, she says, like, honor dictates that if you end up going after the Blackfish and there is a battle here today, I'm duty bound to fight with the Blackfish against you. And I don't, basically we got the sense that neither of them want that to happen.
Right. Neither of them want that to happen.
But
exactly. Like I said, they develop
obviously honor will be the judge, right?
Right. And it's honestly kind of interesting that Brienne is a character that comes up with this good of a plan, where it's like, again, Brienne is so honor bound, and Jaime, obviously, while he's clearly shaped up from where he used to be, he has obviously never operated under that same level of principle, but her whole thing is, it's like, look, you need this castle. We don't really need it yet. We're just trying to win this battle up north against the Boltons. It's like, we need the river. We need the Tully army. Let me try and negotiate. Let me get this out of the way. That way we can kind of come to this mutual understanding. That way you can get what you need without bloodshed, and we can march back north peacefully and win this fight that, as of right now, has nothing to do with you yet, And while Jaime knows that he will definitely have to deal with this later on from Cersei, as far as, once the Starks have reclaimed the North, for right now, it's to everyone's mutual benefit. Problem is that just the Blackfish, man, why does it be the chink in that armor?
Listen, I think this is the best, part about the writing for this storyline is the fact that Jaime and Brienne come up with this plan. They negotiate. They're in agreement. They're going to, hold to honor. And then Brienne goes in and the Blackfish just sort of says, no, that's not going to happen. Yeah. This is my home. It's almost like, we keep saying, right, Ned Stark, he had his sense of honor, and that led to his death. And he was not really, willing to change that. Same thing here with the Blackfish. All right, you have Brienne and Jaime making decisions, making an agreement, and they hand this situation over to the Blackfish. It's like a solution on a silver platter, but he's too stubborn to take it, and that leads to his downfall. In the sequence, and hey, it makes sense too. Like as a viewer of the show, I don't want Brienne and Jaime to come up with a plot and then the Blackfish just goes, yes, sure, that sounds great. and then they kind of leave Riverrun, and that's the end of it.
Right. I mean, the
Right?
Blackfish do
Where's the
understand.
drama if they all just
Right.
agree and get along?
Exactly. Again, we know, again, good drama does not come from just everyone kind of agreeing and getting along. That's kind of the death of good drama.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. It's just
This is like a mini tragedy,
yeah.
because it's the Blackfish can't get out of his own way. There's a perfect opportunity
Right.
for him to
It sucks
move
because too,
on
there's
and
a
do greater
brief
good
moment. There's
against
a
the
brief
Boltons.
moment where he almost goes for it, where it's like you see Sansa's handwriting. He's probably had very little interaction with her. Like he said, he probably hasn't seen her since she was very, very little when she was a newborn. But like, kind of, there's
Yeah.
that brief tinge of emotion in his eyes. But he's like, she writes just like her mother, and he's reminded.
Oh
of
yeah,
his
that
of his
was great.
party. That was awesome.
I thought that was one of the best, because he wasn't going to read the message from Sansa, and then Brienne basically convinces him to do so, and he does read it. And the fact that it's a callback to Sansa's mother, and you're pretty much just like her, that's one of those things where, it just really says a lot about Sansa's growth as a character.
Right.
Because she's now playing the game. She knows how to basically talk to the Blackfish. She's, embodying her mother, Catelyn. And it's just one of those things where now she's no longer the victim. She's on offense. And this is just one of those subtle ways that we're able to see like how effective she is, even though, the Blackfish's decision is to sort of still go against her wishes.
Right, because obviously the Blackfish's decision robs him of the Tully army, which also forces Sansa in order to call the Knights of the Vale, which she had already kind of done. She was already kind of making preparations. She sent the Raven to Littlefinger. You saw that in the last episode because she kind of knew that Jon was marching to his death ultimately, realizing she knew that they weren't going to win ultimately with the few men that they had. But yeah, so the biggest thing that comes from this is that once Jaime kind of realizes that Brienne's plan is not going to work, he finally carries out the plot line that is pulled. Like I said, this is probably the last. I think it's between this and then Sam arriving at the Citadel. Not even Sam arriving at the Citadel in the finale. That is just pulled directly from the book, where he visits Edmure and kind of gives him this pep talk and reminds him, like, look, the war is over. And you need to understand exactly where I'm coming from. He's like, I am not here to help you in any way, shape, or form. Edmure is still kind of, spitting venom at him. Edmure clearly never at all been like the warrior that the Blackfish has been, but Edmure, he's still trying to maintain some loyalty in his side. He's still trying to call Jaime out on his thing. And Jaime's like, you have to understand, everything that you're saying right now, none of that matters to me. It's like, I am doing what I need to do in order to get back to Cersei. She's the only person that matters to me. Whatever my moral quandaries are, she's the only thing that matters here. So here's what you're gonna do in order to make my life a lot easier. I tried this didn't work. And it basically threatens him. It's like, yeah, we still have your wife and newborn baby in what's it called, at Riverrun. And it's like, that baby is technically the last of the Tully line, so it's like, if you don't play ball, that baby's getting chucked off a catapult, and then there goes the Tully line, So he kind of threatens him there, and he forces Edmure to retake the castle using literally just his name. I don't know, like that little bit of a logistical thing there where I'm not quite sure how that works out.
Well, it's the way that it works here is that he's officially the Lord of Riverrun.
He's technically the Lord of Riverrun. As
and so he walks up to the gates. He demands to be let in. They let him in, despite the Blackfish making such a sound case for why you would never let him in.
Right.
But whatever. The men are just like, well, you're not the Lord of this keep. He is, and we're going to follow his orders and let him in. And as soon as he gets in there, and this is what is brilliant about this moment, is like they look at each other, the Blackfish and Edmure, and the Blackfish immediately.
Pretty tense standoff for the most part.
Yeah, and pretty much immediately, like obviously they soak it in for a minute, but immediately the Blackfish understands what's happening. Yeah. And he basically turns and he goes to get Brienne and Podrick out of the castle and put them in a boat to sail secretly away through the moat and the river.
Right.
But the fact is, the Blackfish, understands that he's been defeated, and he's going to take his sword out and fight anyway. And one of the coolest lines of dialogue is like, "It's been years since I've had a fight. I probably won't even put up a good one."
Which I think that's a little bit of a betrayal
is.
because, again, the Blackfish is supposed to be this awesome, badass warrior, in the past.
Yeah.
And obviously, again, it leads to the infamous off-screen death. I realize
which is
now
bad. I think they could have done
it is
a
bad. But
pretty
here's the thing.
awesome sword duel.
I don't necessarily know if the sword duel was necessary, but it's like just one shot of his body. If it's just you cut away from him marching, you maybe allude to it sound wise, then you cut to because the whole thing is they say it's like, yeah, they take the castle completely peacefully, everyone surrenders, and
this could have been
the only casualty is the Blackfish.
This could have been the Star Wars sword fight of Game of Thrones.
Yes.
It's like just Edmure comes and he's got like 3 guys and the Blackfish is taking everybody out, and then Edmure proves to be sort of the get the upper hand. I have the high ground. Maybe they could have just stole a line straight from
straight out of Revenge of the Sith.
But whatever. The main thing is it could have been a cool sequence. Obviously, time would have been a problem because they have other things to get to this episode.
Right.
But it's one of those things where like the Blackfish was a pretty cool character in the early seasons. Then he kind of disappeared. And now he's back, and it's give him a great send off. Show that he's a great warrior. That great warriors still exist. In this world, it would have been probably a cool sequence in my book. Who knows?
Who knows?
Did we miss it? I might be the only one that really would have loved that type of sequence here.
Possibly. But who knows? We'll never get it. And we're left with Brienne and Jaime just wistfully staring at each other as they float away on the river. Now, we'll get to King's Landing. This is probably
doesn't she wave too? Like, oh, bye.
You would think. I fully expect something like that from an episode of this caliber. But, I guess not. But next, King's Landing. This is probably the most 50-50 storyline of this entire episode in the sense of where it is so unbelievably awesome with one sequence, and the next sequence just becomes so stupidly predictable. Like,
first of all, if the Hound is Jason Voorhees, then
the mountain is
who's
Michael
the mountain?
Myers. The mountain has to be Michael Myers. Has to be. He's got the mask and everything.
Yeah. Well, it's. Yeah, I guess that makes sense because like Michael Myers is a little more supernatural than Jason. Although
I don't know, Jason. They make a point to literally say that Jason cannot die. They just
listen.
From Michael Myers.
Jason gets struck by lightning in the 6th movie, and therefore he becomes supernatural. I guess
the point being that they give a reason for why Jason's supernatural. They never say. We're just expected to believe that, like, oh, Michael Myers is just evil incarnate. And I'm like, okay, but that doesn't explain how he's able to survive gunshots, stabs, and, like, his head getting cut off.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Specifically in that latest Halloween Kills.
The less said about that one, the better.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, the guy just wants to stare out his window, and no one will let him do that. And I'm surprised that that's a plot to a horror movie. Is all the killer wants to do is just hang out alone at a window, and the only people that get it are the ones that interrupt his window.
Well, look, but Chris and I already made our thoughts on the Halloween franchise clear last year when we watched every Halloween movie. But
yeah, go back on the Talking Thrones or not Talking Thrones, but the Talking TV
official
podcast
watch series. Yeah,
and definitely watch that episode because it'd probably be better than watching the movie, to be honest with you.
Yeah, probably would.
Anyway, but yeah, the mountain just backs up Cersei, and the Faith militants there like, hey, High Sparrow wants you to face him like right now, and she basically,
like, nah.
Yeah, she basically goes, I choose violence. Which I know is not a Pokemon, but hey, it's definitely an option that she has. And so she chooses violence, and here comes whatchamacallit, Machamp or whatever you want to call the mountain, and he just
I don't know. I mean, you're the wrestling aficionado here. I feel like you're the expert when it comes to coming up with names like this.
No, Machamp is a Pokemon, man.
Machamp.
Go with the jokes here, Dom.
Well,
but anyway, the mountain rips the guy's head off.
And it's odd. Does he rip his head off or does he rip his face off? Like,
listen, it's it's a kind of a medium shot. We only get to see some of the gore, not everything.
Look, it's awesome.
hey, it's enough to make everybody else back down.
Absolutely, yeah. They kind of just walk through in order to Tommen's proclamation of, oh yeah, no more trial by combats, and it's like, just come on, dude. It's like we get it. You're like, we get it. You're an idiot. You're a simpleton. You're being clearly manipulated here, but it's like, really, now you're literally dooming your own mother to death. Like,
listen, you know what would have been great? What we get is great, but no more trial by combat. So all the Faith Militant have to go get Cersei, and then we do a little old boy sequence with the mountain.
I like that. I like that.
But with the mountain and all the Faith Militant.
Well, would that work? Because I feel like the thing that was so cool about Old Boy is the fact that it's like, he literally backed into a corner, just sliced and diced and left and right. It's like the problem is the mountain. I feel like all we had to do is just lift up his foot, like step on and take out like 3 Faith Militant members right there. So, the proportions are a little off.
Yeah, but I think it would have been a great sequence. But regardless, the sequence we get in episode 10 of this season.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a big. So. That's really the only major takeaway from the sequence is the fact that this is the setup for obviously if things to literally go kaboom in the finale. Obviously it's like the only question that I have is why are they treating this like it's a rumor? Because the whole thing is that Cersei was the one who had access to the wildfire back in season 2 because she was going to use it in some capacity against Stannis, and then Tyrion kind of reconnoitered it and used it probably much more smartly and efficiently because he's like, this wildfire, if it gets too excessively used, it can be too dangerous and destroy the whole city.
I think it had to do with the wildfire that was kept in the Red Keep, and that's what they used to defend King's Landing. But the rumor has it, right, that the old king
Mad King Aerys' wildfire stash that he left across the whole city that he was going to use.
Exactly. And so I think it was one of those things where it was like, if that's true, can we get confirmation that it's actually there? So
Qyburn, the new master of Whisperers. So if there's anybody who's going to do it, it's going to be him.
Yeah. So I don't think they spend that much time on that point, but the main thing is to really set it up in this episode that something's going to happen sometime in the rest of the season,
right,
dealing with wildfires. So we kind of don't get a sense of obviously this is our 3rd, 4th watch through the series,
right?
We know what's going to happen, but from the first time point of view, like, you don't necessarily know how the wildfire is going to come into play. We just know that she might have access to this very deadly weapon.
Right. They do a good job of building up to it. Like I said, it's been a little bit of time since you've seen the wildfire in action. You don't really know it, but it's like I feel like it's one of those things that it's like people who know are gonna know, and it's gonna make the payoff even more explosive once it actually happens. I don't know how many more forceful puns I can throw in there in order to hit up to it. Well, but it's crazy because it's like you already get like the gonzo-ness of the Battle of the Bastards. So when the Winds of Winter opens in that way, like that amazingly tense sequence that builds up to it in that absolutely excellent way. I think it's so unexpected, but it's so refreshing too, where it's like, wow, okay, it's another instance where it's like, the finales we all talked about, for the last like 5 seasons now have almost always consistently been wind downs from the previous episode, but it's always so awesome when you can get a finale that like kicks it up just another notch.
Oh yeah,
after that awesome penultimate.
Listen, we'll talk about it when we get there, but that opening sequence in episode 10 somehow reminds me of Donnie Darko, like the whole intro to the high school and the montage.
Oh, with Tears for Fears playing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's because it's like slow pace, sort of like slow motion montage.
I love the score that's playing during it.
Exactly, introducing you to all the characters in the school, and that's sort of the opening here of episode 10 is kind of letting you know that like something, there's these people living this perfect moment, but there's something kind of underneath that's about to come.
Sinister underlying.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about that episode.
Yeah, like I said, the less said, the better. So like I said, let's burn through these last 2 storylines. Let's get out of here. This is probably going to be our first episode yet, but
yeah, for the podcast for sure.
Absolutely.
But I just want to say, like, this season has one of the most momentous ends the last few episodes.
Absolutely.
Like, this episode is really good in terms of like, just again showing us the Hound, showing us the mountain. Like, there's a lot of moving pieces that are sort of continued to move forward in this episode. And yeah, it's not necessarily like anything major happens. It's kind of just another episode of Game of Thrones. So maybe not the most exciting episode. I can understand your argument that you made last week and you continue to make this week, where it's not necessarily a great episode. It's just,
Right. It's
it
filler
kind of,
setup at best, and at worst, that's what we're about to talk about.
yeah, I think it's one of those things where it kind of propels a lot of things forward and clears it off the deck so that we can have the Battle of the Bastards and the Winds of Winter, and just have these two amazing back-to-back episodes. So some of that usual kind of wishy-washy setting up the next season that happens in the final 10th episode, I think they cover some of that here so that they can really focus on some cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, oh boy, let's get to it. We're back, Marine. It's funny because before we talked to the pre-lobby about this, and I'm like, man, those last two episodes were so good. They were so unbelievably good. And then I reminded myself, I'm like, oh wait, that's right, because there was no Marine in all of them. Now you gave a pretty compelling argument as to why Marine this episode is settled, but it's like, to me, I mean,
this is the best part of the storyline.
But I feel like I gotta have the opposite, because it's like once again, it's reaffirming everything that I've been saying this entire season. Where again, Tyrion's a moron. Missandei and Grey Worm were 100% right. He made all the wrong decisions, and once again, very conveniently, the minute that Varys, it's almost like Varys has been like Tyrion's shield against all the other crazy things that could come and happen. And once he leaves, it's like, oh, boom, the literally shit hits the fan. Where they're walking through the city, like, oh wow, things have really calm down here. Things seem to have finally gotten back to normal. The Red Priests are as if they've never seen a TV show before, where it's like, the minute that you say that shit's gonna hit the fan. They see all the Red Priestesses, they're preaching the good word of Daenerys. Things are
I don't think anyone in Essos would have watched the TV program.
I don't think TV
not that time frame, Tom. But anyway, it's the main thing is I think a lot of the setup, for this storyline is just sort of, it's just there. It's like things are happening. We understand that the other masters are sort of supporting the rebellion in Marine. I get all that. It's not anything glamorous, and I don't think Daenerys getting the Dothraki was like really that big of an achievement, right?
Right.
It's supposed to be, but it was like, okay, that kind of makes sense, so a lot of the stuff happening in this season with Daenerys is sort of just like, okay, this is kind of like expected, her storyline is kind of, the moments are just there to give her something to do this season. Right. It's kind of like the major thing that's left is for her to make it to Westeros.
Right.
And what I will say here in this sequence, obviously Daenerys gets back to Marine and has to take care of business. And we get some cool dragon stuff, like flying in the air,
next
burning
episode,
up ships.
Because the problem is this sequence ends. So
I'm sorry.
I'm
confusing
exactly.
my two episodes
That's the problem. Is I'm like, you're right. I'm like, you're 100% right. But everything you're talking about, again, doesn't happen until the Battle of the Bastards, because once Varys, Varys leaves to be like, oh, I have to go and recruit some other allies. And like, I still think this is another missed opportunity where it's why did they never do a point of where it's like Varys was playing both sides? Varys was kind of, maybe using the slaver, like kind of manipulating the slavers as a way to test. Like, could you imagine how awesome of a twist it would have been if it was revealed that Varys was behind the slavers and the Sons of the Harpy from the beginning as a test to see like how Daenerys would handle herself as a leader, and as a conqueror, how awesome would that have been? And I feel like that would have given him even more validation to worry about her once she gets to Westeros, seeing the way that she handles it, because she doesn't handle like a tactful politician. She comes in with the dragons and blows everything up, which again, we as fans are cheering for that. But again, that's supposed to be another like part in her descent into darkness. So like, I feel like if they had set the seeds here, it would have made Varys' turn against her feel way more earned in the last season, because again, the whole thing that's established at the beginning of kind of Varys' arc for this last couple seasons is the fact that he is trying to find someone who is better than all the rest of the people in Westeros. And I'm sorry, but it's like, if we're just going based off of Daenerys' track record as far as how she handles stuff in seasons 5 and then when she comes back in season 6, not a great job, So it's like, I feel like them not doing that is yet another thing of where it's like, okay, again, Varys is right up there as far as just complete and utter character portrayals, between Littlefinger and Tyrion. And if anything, I feel that would have given Tyrion more motivation too, because like Tyrion would have been like, oh my God, this person who I trusted, we really shouldn't have. But again, this person who I trusted, he committed this horrible, despicable act, and he can never really fully be trusted because he's always going to be trying to play to the better side,
Yeah, I don't know. I think your kind of fantasy booking of Varys really pulling some strings and testing Daenerys, I think is a great idea, because that would actually bring something to the table and make this season worthwhile. And then, maybe to a certain degree, Tyrion is the one that finds this out, and as he's like confronting Varys, like Daenerys is killing everybody,
Right.
and then Varys is like, you see, she's all about
Right.
destruction.
Right.
And it could have been like, they decided to, they're playing now sort of the Littlefinger Varys game that took place in the first part of the season, but now Tyrion and Varys are playing that, but in the court of, Daenerys, and they don't necessarily go straight openly for each other. But there's a little back and forth game, of basically trying to really steer Daenerys in a positive direction. I think that could have been like some pretty cool dynamics that are brought up. And what I will say is, yes, I totally was skipping ahead to the next episode. It's almost like the Battle of the Bastards. I just assume that that's the only thing that happens in that episode, and so I just think that the end of Marine happens here, and I forget that it happens at the pretty much the first half.
It's
of the
just
next
setting
episode.
up for it is the problem, because what you have is Varys leaving. Again, again, and that's another reason why I think that kind of my fantasy booking, that it just was such a missed opportunity, because the timing could not have been better. It's the same thing with last season, where last season he shows up right when Jorah and Daario leave the city, and then he leaves right when she gets back. And then magically somehow he gets. It's the most confusing thing too, as far as logistics wise, where in the finale he's shown going to Dorne to meet with Olenna and the Sand Snakes, and then he went back, but then he's seen on the ship traveling with them towards Westeros. So he went from Dorne back to Marine, only to sail back to Westeros. The logistics of that don't really make any sense at all. And then he's like, oh, I'm conspicuously leaving, totally not at all suspicious. I don't know. I stupidly thought that it's like, oh, okay, they're bringing back some of the plot mechanics. Varys has kind of been playing this as a long game, and they just never did. It's like, oh, I'm like, okay, what was the point of this then? And then you just have Tyrion cracking more terrible jokes with Missandei and Grey Worm, trying finally getting them to do a drinking game. And again, of course, the Masters, to nobody's surprise at all, immediately launch their attack. And of course, that's right when Daenerys arrives, and that's when we cut away from.
Oh yeah, these are with the jokes, right? Where
yep.
Missandei says something like, "Oh, I can scream help in 40 different languages."
It's like, wow, great, how compelling.
And then Grey Worm tells a shady joke as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've already talked enough about how much of a betrayal this is for Tyrion's character and all that. And I mean, hey, at least we came up with another good fantasy booking element from this episode.
Yeah, no, listen, like I said, it's pretty much. I just reread the notes, right? For this topic, and I'm like, I don't even remember this sequence happening, vaguely. It's one of those things where it's like, as you're watching it in the episode, you're like, okay, let's move on. And again, we'll get to it next week, because as you've revealed to me another time, the meat and potatoes of what I want to talk about actually takes place.
It's next week's episode, not this week.
I'm so excited because I like the end of the storyline. It was like another thing of
where it's like, Pat, I love everything you say, but I'm like, but I don't think that happens in this episode.
No. It definitely is next episode, and but I'm excited. I like, this is one of those things. I like the end of the Marine storyline. It just, obviously it's a little action packed. It sets up everything for, Daenerys going forward after this season. She's finally going to go to Westeros. It wraps things up relatively quickly and nicely. And we're finally going to get the thing that we want in the next season. Well, what we think we want. And it's, again, the same thing with the sort of High Sparrow storyline. I really love the final episode of this season, and how that storyline comes to an end. And, it's like we had to sit through 2 seasons of, questionable scenes and storylines that were really just kind of spinning the plate and keeping King's Landing going. It's like something had to happen there over the course of 2 seasons, and it just happened to be the Fanatics.
Yep.
So we're finally going to get some movement on these storylines. We're going to see some, basically closure of certain aspects of the storylines, and we're going to start seeing where these characters are going moving forward. And it starts next episode with the end of Marine, and I'm just super excited about it.
Indeed, it does. But before we wrap up Marine, we have to wrap up one last story arc. And I've been dreading it since we started the show, since we started this podcast back in April of last year. I've been dreading reaching this moment because I have famously said, I'm like, I think of all the things, Game of Thrones is obviously, in the last couple of seasons, had a few moments that are not to its strongest one. But I think the thing that constantly enrages me about this sequence, like I said, I've gone on many Facebook rants about it. So I'm trying to put those days behind me. I'm trying to gain a little bit more of an attentive, mature stance on it.
Can I guess, Dom? Is it the fact that the Lady Crane character makes bad soup? Is that the thing?
Not
that
even
really
that, but forget the fact that the way that I've watched this sequence so many times. I've analyzed it. I've looked over it. I still have no effing clue how the Waif actually killed her, because the Waif is like only like a couple inches taller than Arya. She's not a particularly large person. We can assume that she's relatively physically fit just based off the fact that she's an assassin. But like, what is it? It's like she's like impaled on a chair. Like I still don't even know. Like it's so confusing from an aesthetic standpoint. And then obviously you get the parkour. Okay, look. Let me backtrack.
Wait, doesn't she just like push her from a height?
So let me set the scene.
Off the chair? I don't even remember the scene.
So let me set the scene. So here's what happens. So it doesn't even start with Arya. It starts with Lady Crane finding Arya in an alley, like, because she sees a streak of blood. How she knows that it's Arya, I have no idea, because it's like, okay, it's Braavos. You gotta assume that knifing's happening on a regular basis there. It's a city in whatever era of medieval history this is supposed to be mimicking. There probably is gonna be just random knifings and just random bodies. So how she thinks to investigate it and just happens to find Arya, okay, that's one thing. It's a little bit of just the plot kind of gestating for it to happen. And then obviously, again, just more clunky setup. Like I said, there's been setup not only for the last two episodes of the season, but there's been setup for the rest of the season throughout this entire episode.
It's the best dialogue in the world.
It's the best, where she's like, "Oh, what's west of Westeros?" Because they need something to give Arya for the last two seasons.
There's that, but there's also like, "Oh, hey, you're really good at patching people up," and it's like, yeah, I used to get jealous at all the men I'm with, so I'd stab them and then I would feel guilty and patch them up.
Like, okay.
Okay.
So we're doing this now. Okay.
It's strange. There's strange justifications for things. And then, she was too busy stabbing her lovers and patching them up to make soup.
She asks her about the actress that wanted her dead, the other one, and she's like, "Oh, you should have seen what I did to her." And I'm like,
listen,
what did you do to her? Like,
that's the weirdest thing ever, because Arya was there as the assassin. In my mind, Lady Crane
has no beef, no vendetta. Arya's like, oh, she's just this sweet little girl. I can relate to her so much.
No, it doesn't make any sense. It's Lady Crane. Not at all. In my mind, Lady Crane would be like, "Oh, you tried to kill me. Like, you were hired by the other actress."
Right.
And so, the fact is, Lady Crane just trusts her absolutely. And then they're talking about it. It's like, "Oh, well, what I did to her face, she'll never be acting again." It's kind of like that's a little too personal for the two of them. Sees how I would think Lady Crane.
You gotta think. I don't know how long Arya's been watching this play, but it's like these two have had a max of 2 encounters before this, And she's like, all of a sudden, like, "Oh, you can come live with me. You can be my adopted daughter," and all that. Like, again, it's another one of those things where we talk about it. It's like that thing in war movies where it's like every time somebody in a war movie is talking about, "Oh man, I can't wait to get home to see my son," and all that. I'm like, okay, may as well put like a red shirt on that guy because they're a goner. And that's exactly what it is. Where it's like, oh, we got another person who's offering to take Arya in and be a matronly figure to them. That person is like goner. Like, may as well put the red X over their face right now. And it's like the whole thing is it's like I don't even remember. It's like she goes into the other room. The Waif is like standing in the doorway or something. Like, you don't even see the death. That's what makes it even more confusing. You don't actually see it. You just see like Arya hears a commotion in the other room, walks in and sees Lady Crane just lying there. Like, it's so crazy. And I guess what makes the scene so confusing is that it's like you're meant to assume that like she's impaled on the stool because there's no other signs of bodily harm. There's no stabbings. Her neck's not twisted or distorted. Nothing. And so, but the problem is the way they have her lying there. She's lying like perfectly laced in between the stool legs. So I'm like, what? I don't know how that pulls off. And so, of course, it leads to the parkour sequence and kind of what I'm trying to get to as part of the point that the cherry on top
hardcore parkour, right?
Sunday of stupidity is that this is a sequence that does not belong in this type of a show. You know, I mean, obviously we know that Game of Thrones has action sequences for sure. You know, big battle sequences.
There's no medieval parkour.
No, like, it's just like when has there ever been like a chase like this? And first of all, it defeats the entire purpose of the Faceless Men, which is like, okay, they literally take other people's faces on. They're supposed to be subtle here, like. She's not even, it would be one thing if she was like ripping faces out of her pocket, like throwing on other faces or what. They don't even bother to do that. She just runs and just chases her throughout the city. And besides the fact of, like I said, when I covered this last episode where it's like, okay, Arya just took 6 shots to the gut, magically survived all that, got patched up by Lady Crane, could somehow now do all of these parkour ninja stuff all throughout the city. You know, she's rolling over bins of origins, falling down steps, running. I'm like, she has to have torn those stitches open at least like 6 or 7 different times right now, you know? But no, none of that affects her. This is what I mean. This is official more proclamation that Arya has officially just fully transitioned into being an NPC. She's not a real character anymore. And so she obviously leads the Waif to the place where she has Needle. And then, of course, they have to do the thing of where it's like, okay, naturally, because this is the build-up to Battle of the Bastards, so naturally we can't actually show any cool action sequences. Everything has to be kept in suspense. The Blackfish has to die off screen. And so Arya, naturally, instead of actually, you know, seeing her fight and kill the Waif and actually seeing, like, you know, if anything, I feel like this was another missed opportunity because this would have been, I think, a great callback to the whole thing of Needle, the whole point, and one of the whole big reasons why she came to Braavos, besides the Faceless Men, was Syria. You know, all the way back to season 1, her water dancing teacher. You know, the fact that she felt such a kinship, such a connection to him. The fact that you can kind of see like their bond that was forming in the sense that they were both kind of outsiders. He kind of understood that she wasn't going to follow the traditionalist path, so he was trying to show her like this kind of alternative lifestyle. You know, she's got Needle, which is more of like a water dancing thing, like where I think it would have been so awesome to where like she tried this whole thing with the Faceless Men and that didn't work out. So naturally she goes back to what worked for her, which was the water dancing. And it would have been so cool to see her using the water dancing techniques to take out the Waif. Nope. What do we get instead? She slices the candle in half. We get the scene in the Hall of Faces. Jaqen walks up. You see the Waif's bloody face there. Man, the whole lot of sequences and trails of blood in this sequence too. And then Arya does the whole thing of where it's like, oh, I'm Arya Stark, and you're not going to send anyone else after me, and I'm going home. And I'm like, oh, okay, but like, what makes you think they're going to not send someone else after you, Like, and then obviously also where it's like, what makes this even more confusing is the fact that, like Bran, we're led to believe that it's like, oh, it might not be Arya, it's supposed to be intentionally ambiguous. She cut the candle. We don't know what happened. Is that the Waif wearing Arya's face? But I mean, that just raises even more questions and makes it even more confusing. But I don't know. Like, what's your take on all that?
Listen, so I did take a look. I quickly went and found the shot.
Okay, good. Maybe you could do something that I didn't.
Of Lady Crane. It's the sequence is pretty clear. Like, she gets on the step stool to get the medicine. The Waif kind of shows up and is dressed as someone else, and then we hear a noise, and it's Arya's. We're in Arya's face as she goes to the other room. So it's essentially they kicked the stool out from underneath her, and she fell, and she like cracked her back or whatever it is.
Okay. I mean, it wasn't that high up, was it?
It was just a steps. It was just a step stool. The thing is, it looks like the step stool is underneath her, like turned upside down.
Right.
So, like, was this like such a super Jackie Chan type kick where the stool got like twisted upside down, and then she came down hard on it, and like somehow. The other thing
too about the Faceless Men is that I've always been under the impression that, again, they're master assassins, they're killers, all that. But the whole thing that always confused me about the Faceless Men is it's like they're assassins, they're not fighters. It's kind of like the same thing essentially as the Sons of the Harpy. The whole thing is they're a threat when they're in mass, obviously, because again, obviously a mass of them, they just surround people, just start knifing them one by one, but they're not particularly good fighters because again, unless you get them just against the Unsullied, who just magically lose their ability to fight against them. The whole thing is that the Sons of the Heartbeat can be taken down and killed pretty easily. They're not good fighters. They're street urchins. And that's kind of always the same sense that I got from the Faceless Men. Is I'm like, again, they're assassins, but there's a reason why they stick to the shadows, because they know that if they have to come out and fight in force, they'll lose, That's not how their sorcery benefits them. So that's why it's so confusing to me when it's like you have these weird parkour sequences, because it just feels so out of place, I mean, I could be reaching, but like, I feel like that I'm just based off of what I've seen.
I think the parkour thing is just a director choice of, oh, hey, we want to do a chase sequence. And
telling you,
so far, we have this shooting location. It's good for parkour. Let's just do it. Yeah. I think, obviously Lady Crane has magic stitches, and it really keeps those wounds shut. Because there's no way that Arya can really do the, like, she was stabbed like what, 5 times, 6 times in the
I counted it 6 times.
Yeah, and it's like, just these are magic stitches keeping everything together. I'm totally okay with the end of this sequence though. Like it's clear that Arya had a plan, that if the Waif found her, she was going to do a certain route and get to this room with the candle that someone magically has lit overnight. And she has the sword there, and she cuts it, and she's in the dark, and then it cuts back to the hall, and she put the Waif, her face, the Waif's face, right in the hall, and says, she's finally called no one, but she says her name's Arya Stark, and then she heads back to Westeros. So I feel like after watching the sequence again, the sequence definitely gives us a definitive, she is, who she's always been. She's just, a different version of that. I think she defeated the Waif. I know there's sort of this idea that the Waif could have just taken her face, but I think that's obviously there's nothing to support that theory going forward in any of the other seasons. And so I think you just have to read this as she really did defeat the Waif and put the face back on the wall.
I don't know. Like I said, it's just for a storyline that should have been filled with so much ambiguity, and for a storyline that surprisingly, like I said, was better than I thought. Like I said, I spent the majority of these last 2 seasons kind of shitting all over the Braavos arc, and the thing that kind of surprises me upon this rewatch is that for the most part, I think outside of like the first episode when Jaqen disguises that other guy was just leading her around this, it was just turned her away for kind of no reason and then just brought her back willy-nilly. I'm like, okay, you could have saved a lot of time there. The Braavos arc was for the most part pretty good, because it was kind of her training from when she initially touched down in Braavos, the House of Black and White, to getting her first assignment, to ignoring that from Maren Trent, and then suffering as a result of it, and then kind of, watching the play and getting the second assignment with Lady Crane. For the most part, it was all good, It's really just this episode and kind of their whole, like, just, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to do a cool parkour sequence, and that's what's going to be the ending, the end result of it. That kind of torches it, And that's kind of what makes it even more disappointing in hindsight.
If I were to, like, fantasy book the end of the Arya sequence, you would have the ambiguity of, did the Waif conquer Arya, or vice versa,
right?
And then when Jaqen finds her, is like, she says, "Oh, I'm Arya Stark. I want to go back to Westeros," and he's like, "No, you can't go. you're bound to the Faceless Men."
Right.
And then she's sort of like,
kind of just lets her go. Like, I'm like,
well, no, in the actual case, she's just let go at this point. But I think it, even though she defeated the Waif, it's like she's still bound by this. She can't leave. And then, as she's kind of hanging out in the hall and sort of can't really leave, wouldn't it be great if you had someone that had some encounter with the Night King, like came in and said, "Hey, we need someone to take care of the Night King," and like, then she's literally, a name has been given to the Faceless God,
right? And
now she has a reason to go back to Westeros.
Exactly.
That might be a little too convoluted, but the fact is, that would be cool to have this idea that the Waif / Arya, whoever she really is actually been given a mission to go back there and take care of, the big bad.
Right.
And that would play into the fact that, spoiler alert, Arya is the one that takes the Night King down
Right.
In the Long Night episode.
100%. Yeah.
So it would, there's room to play with that as a storytelling mechanic and really bolster the whole point of the storyline, which is to, which in retrospect, it was to get Arya out of Westeros, give her something to do, and make her like a cool assassin.
Right.
And then just put her back in Westeros.
I don't know. Like I
there
said,
could have been
because
so much more to the story.
Right. And what's confusing too about the wrap up as well is that even though like a lot of the characters where they left off in the books are still like, they're still at the certain points where we kind of left them, like where the point where the books and the show kind of realigned before the show took off on its own. The confusing thing about Arya is that the problem is that the books ends right with Arya getting her eyesight back and then killing the crooked lender person from last season, and that's where the books end. Like we don't know what happens after that, like they may be hinting that she's going to get another assignment that's going to bring her back to Westeros, that's going to bring her into conflict with with some of the other main characters, but like we don't know. And I think that's another big reason why it really, really felt like Benioff and Weiss just pumped the brakes there and just turned her into an NPC. But I don't know. Like I said,
listen, I just want, we're HBO's talking about all these prequel and sequel shows and everything in Game of Thrones. I just want an Arya show that's called Clams, Oysters, and Cockles or whatever. And she is in Way Westeros, this new continent that she's found, and she's selling seafood. And
it's what she knows. It's what she's most familiar with.
Yeah, it could be half-hour episodes. It could be comedy. Let's get some of the cast of Friends to inhabit the Game of Thrones world. Could you
imagine Matt LeBlanc doing a British accent? That would be hilarious. No, but what's funny too is that so they obviously just announced that a Jon Snow sequel series / Game of Thrones spinoff is happening, and I very vividly remember back in 2019 when the finale aired, as they were kind of cross-cutting between Arya, Sansa, and Jon as the show was ending, and I'm like, there's the Arya spinoff, there's the Sansa spinoff, there's the Jon spinoff. So if we got the Jon spinoff, I'm waiting for the Arya and the Sansa spinoff. So you may be more onto something than you may think, Pat. But
just think like a live action Bob's Burgers, except for with Arya and seafood.
Arya and seafood. I love it. That's where we're going to leave it off. Like I said, we got through it. Season 6, episode 8, No One. Be sure to tune in next week. It's another big battle sequence episode. Battle of the Bastards. We've been hinting at it all season. We're finally going to hit it next week. You guys are not going to want to miss this. Be sure to tune into new episodes of Talkin' Thrones every Friday on the Talkin' TV podcast feed as we continue to power our way through it. We're practically done with season 6 at this point, and then it's just the final 13, and then we're done. Pat, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Hey, listen, I'm posting things on Instagram at Patrick W. Huber. Just random things, whatever floats my boat. You log on, you can see whenever I did that last, and it's some fun stuff. So catch me there, Instagram at Patrick W. Huber. That's awesome. Where to find me.
You can follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talkin' TV podcast. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitch. Be sure to listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you're not already. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next week for Battle of the Bastards.